we have retired detective lieutenant, is that how you say it? David Thatcher. Now, for you who've been here several semesters, you may have recognized him. I think you've been here once before. Twice before? Okay, well, you still don't set the record, but with us. He is going to be talking about, well, first of all, he is with the Rhode Island, or was with the Department of Environmental Management. So we had John Leo not too long ago, and we also experimented with videoing John Leo. So if you're interested in seeing that, this is an experiment for us to video. If you're interested in seeing that, it is up and available online, and I suspect it's going to take about a week to get this one. You're nodding your head back there? Okay, good. It's going to take about a week to get this one up and online as well. Lieutenant Thatcher has a bachelor's degree in bachelor's degree in science with public administration minor. Criminal justice, but I wasn't going to say the name of the school. It wasn't here. Some other place in Rhode Island. And then he went to the FBI National Academy in 2004. He is an instructor in what I would call metal detection nationwide. So we're very fortunate to have him here with us today. He's worked on a number of scenes, and he's very nicely outlined a few of them for me. Got involved in an international murder in 1994 and assisted Rhode Island with an automobile theft unit. Did they put it underground?
Yes, they did.
Maybe that's where those paintings are. Have you guys been following the paintings? We've had the head of that museum here twice. When they finally get those paintings back, we'll have him here again. Every time he comes, he won't tell us about the case because he says it's still ongoing. Okay. And he provides training for the FBI in this. So with that, I'm going to let him provide you the training, even if it's just for fun and games up here. How many of you have a metal detector you play with? Nobody has a metal detector?
I'm hoping to see more hands before this class is over.
I bought my brother one for Christmas. It looked like a lot of fun, and I see people down at the beach having fun with them all the time. None of you have one. I don't know what to say. Maybe you're going to be converting them.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Oxley. As Dr. Oxley said, my name is David Thatcher. I'm a retired detective lieutenant with the State of Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, Commer, Office of Criminal Investigation. And many of you may quizzically say, what's the Office of Criminal Investigation? Well, it was an office founded back in 1987 that was dedicated to environmental crimes for the state. Show of hands of how many people here are interested in the environment and curbing environmental crimes. All right, the rest of you must be living out of state. Anyways, it was a very interesting career. I am the fourth generation in my family to pursue a career in law enforcement. I thought I was third, and I did some family genealogical research and found out, in fact, I had another ancestor, a great uncle, come out of the Navy as a commander and went on Newport Police. My father and grandfather both Warwick police officers. My grandfather began in 1934, my father in 1962. How many of you in here are interested in a career in law enforcement? All right, let me tell you, conditions have gotten much better over the years. My father reminded me when he started in 1962, he was making $64 a week. That's with a family with 4 children. He had to borrow $375 from my great-grandmother, and he bought his firearm used. And they were ordered to work details for free. So the profession has come a long way. So appreciate the benefits that people such as my father and grandfather fought for many years ago. Today's class is going to be, it's titled Metal Sensing Technology in Crime Scene Investigation. We're going to talk about a number of things, including the metal detector and its use for processing a crime scene or suspect crime scene. We're also going to talk about cases I've worked on in the past, going back to 1993 with the Rhode Island State Police. We'll be discussing some of the use of ground-penetrating radar. Anyone in here have any use in ground-penetrating radar or have any interest in that field? Okay, also the electromagnetic induction equipment, which is a profiler. I recently became certified in both of those pieces of equipment. I am not an expert by any means. However, I will say that I'm a very knowledgeable person when it comes to metal detection. And I like the term knowledgeable. A lot of people like the term expert. An expert is a person that I equate to the bomb technician who just before he got blown up learned that last color why he didn't know what it was. So I like knowledgeable. Anyways, and I hope my hair looks a little bit better than John Leo's. John is a great guy. We call him our Quincy of toxicology. And he was, I always say that he was a wannabe police officer, but he was one of our best assets at the DEM when I worked there for 20 plus years. So anyways, you may ask, how did I get interested in metal detecting? Well, I grew up as a cop rat. And by that I mean that many weekends and holidays my dad was working to support the family. So my mom, who always had an interest in history, would pack up the station wagon, the family car, on the weekends with digging tools, and we'd go out to old abandoned farm sites. And I actually started into the hobby as a dump digger. And maybe it was a prelude for what would come later on in life for me. Going out there, digging in and looking for clues, digging up things at crime scenes. But it's something I absolutely loved. When I was at the age of 12, not many children could say this back in my time, and we won't say when that time was. I read Dr. Schliemann's book on the dig on the city of Troy. That's how fascinated I was with history. And in my mind, I was going to be, even before Indiana Jones became heard of, I was going to be a modern-day historical explorer. Although it didn't pan out for me, as you can see. I never went to Egypt, never discovered any pharaoh's buried treasures or any hidden tombs. But I did find a great deal of historical artifacts. And I found out the more I researched, I love reading about history. I'd go out, and I segued from bottle digging, bought my first used metal detector at a flea market, and the rest is history. When I moved into Coventry, Rhode Island back in 1981, I noted that there was a large tract of land behind our home. And we had 4 children, my wife and I. They're all adults now. Actually, I have 4 granddaughters, 2.5 through age 17. That's the virtues of getting married in kindergarten, but wait until elementary school before having children. And they noticed that there was an outcrop of foundations behind the woods, and an old colonial house had been present there. And I was fascinated by this. The house was of a large size, telling me that people had money, were of some substance. I found the outbuilding, the privy, the sheep shed, the barn. But I knew, just something told me there's something here in this cellar hole. And if I'm not exactly sure of the date, my children will remind me, it was winter, February of 1989. The UPS truck pulled up, February of 1989, and it was my late Christmas. I was tongue-in-cheek. How many of you remember the boy there in A Christmas Story there, wanted the Red Ryder repeating rifle? That was me. Okay, just a few years older. The box came in, I opened up the box, I read the instructions quick, I put batteries in there, and it said if you hear a double bell tone, that's the sound of treasure. Next thing I know, I take my 4-year-old son, Eric, we go jumping back over the brook into the woods where the foundation was, fired up the machine, jumped in the foundation. They were all stones from the massive central fireplace. And this is it. This is it. This is that moment where he cocked back with the rifle and he shot it up, but no icicles hit me in the eye, thankfully. And I got a signal. It went ding, ding, the sound of money. And I said, great, this is what I've been waiting for. The only problem is the ground was frozen. It was winter. The frost heaved down to about 8 or 9 inches. So I had to run back home, had to go back, get my metal detector left on the ground, got my son, came back, got a pickaxe, went back, dug down. There, about 9 inches down, I found my first coin of Fugio cent, 1787, in mint condition. Today it's valued at about $1,700. But wait, just like the commercial, wait, we'll double that offer. That coin was the first of 26 coins I found from the 1700s in that cellar hole. It was a lifetime opportunity for me, especially with my interest in history. And I wanted to know more about who lived there, what life was like back then, but everything there was a time capsule. Everything I found was from the 17 and 1800s. I found so many things. I finally put the metal detector down, and like an archaeologist, I sifted the entire foundation with the help of my children. We'd find buttons. In fact, a lot of artifacts I have here today for show and tell afterwards, I'd be glad to share with you, were found from that foundation site. Colonial keys, everything you could think of. Back in the colonial times, that was a focal point of people's lives. They did not venture more than 10 to 12 miles from home. They did not have mass transportation. The farm was their life. The home was everything to them. And more than likely, this house, either through abandonment, or decay, or fire, everything fell into the cellar hole. I came along 150, 75 years later, and voila, I started digging up these treasures. But anyways, that's a little prelude into how I got into the hobby and some of the things I found. Is anybody going to ask me the best thing I found? Come on, there must be one hand out there. Yes?
What's the best thing you ever found?
I'm glad you asked that question. The best thing I ever found, well, I could be a little sentimental about that. It could be time with my children while we're doing it, although they would argue to say, Dad, that was not fun for us walking behind you like little penguins while you had the metal detector. George Washington inauguration button, 1789, valued at over $5,000. But it's not really so much the value of the things I find, although I do find things of great value. It's more the intrinsic value. It's the history behind that, such as the George Washington button. I wanted to know, I found out that this person, whoever that was a delegate to the first electoral college in Philadelphia in 1789. To me, that was just as important as say, hey, I've got something here worth X amount of dollars. I wanted to know who had this, because more than likely they took this and sewed it on the coat and worked around the farm. The button became frayed over years through use and just fell into the snow or into the ground. Frost heave opened up. That's another thing we'll talk about. How do we find things so deep in the ground? Could have settled into the ground, and years later I come along and found it. So it's fascinating, but we'll talk more about the hobby later. I've always been fascinated by law enforcement. I actually started my career in law enforcement unofficially in 1972. How many of you are familiar with your communities where they have a Youth Explorer League or the Police Cadets? Okay, I began that in 1972. It was a branch of the Boy Scouts of America. And they had just started this group, the Explorers. It was similar to the Junior Naval Cadets. My dad told me about it. I said, yep. I said, sign me up. Took me down the AG's office when I used to be located on Pine Street in Providence. Signed up, and I had an opportunity of a lifetime. The first summer, I was selected to work up in the detective division in 1972, and actually had the opportunity to work in the evidence room, catalog everything, but more importantly, they trained me in the art of photography and fingerprinting. In the morning, they'd bring up the prisoners, I'd take their mug shots, then I'd fingerprint them, and I actually started learning the Henry classification. So I attribute that to fueling the fire for my love in law enforcement. Speeding up a little bit, 1992, I had the opportunity to attend a course here at the University of Rhode Island, and that is in the forensic science, or forensic evidence science course, and that was with Director Dennis Hilliard, who's in charge of the crime lab. How many of you, you're all familiar with Dennis? Okay, with Director Hilliard. That was in 1992. We were into the last part of the course. I think it was about a 7-month course. And somewhere along the line, Director Hilliard knew that I had a great deal of experience metal detecting, which to me, when I got into law enforcement in 1991, it was a marriage between the two. I already had this experience as a hobbyist. Now with my forensics training, I was able to take and apply that. It takes the average person between 50 to 100 hours to become acclimated to using a particular metal detector, to do it fluidly and with ease. And I've done a tremendous amount of training over the years, and the policemen will always ask me, how do I get better at this? And I tell them, it's a perishable skill. You need to take the equipment home. Most departments have a metal detector. It's locked away in the evidence storage room or equipment locker. The batteries are probably leaking out because it hasn't been used. They're intimidated by it. But the equipment today is so modernized, They have factory presets where basically, I hate to use the word load and go, but they're load and go machines. Turn the power switch on and off you're going. So being a perishable skill, I tell them take it home, learn how to use it, take it to the beach, take it to the park. If you have children, make it a family event. This way here, when the occasion arises and you have a need to go to a crime scene, you're not going to be like most police officers and look like the deer in the headlight. What do I do? So I try to make it fun. And when it becomes of interest that way from history or just finding things, then they become more acclimated. But you have to use it. It's a perishable skill, like most things that we learn. Fingerprinting, photography. Hey, as I'm going along here, I promised myself I'd do an icebreaker. How am I doing so far, by the way? Okay? Oh, another course that I teach, you probably find very interesting, interview and interrogation. I teach communication skills. I love communication skills. And you know what? It's dying. It's a dying art because of the technological age. Everything is tweeted. It's text. So when the time comes and you have to go for a job interview, you're standing there in front of the potential employer and you're like the deer in the headlights. So if any of you need any pointers, I teach body language. How many of you know communications? Body language is 58% of communications. 58%. 37% tone of voice. Ben Stiller. Hi, dry eyes. Okay? Only 7% choice of words. It's your body language. And believe me, when you learn to get that nailed down, it's going to help you with your social life. It's going to help you in your professional life. But that's a discussion for another day. Talk to Dr. Oxley and I'll come back. There was an elderly Italian gentleman who gardened all his life. He's from the old country. Had the grapevines growing in the backyard, the garden, bless you. And old age is catching up with him quickly. And he's lamenting that he doesn't think he's going to be able to grow a garden this season coming up. Spring is here. Only problem is his son Tony is in prison. Tony's a good kid, but he's made some wrong choices. Hung around with the wrong crowd. You know how it goes. So the father writes him a letter. Dear Tony, he says, I really wish, he says, or actually with the Italian accent, I really wish you weren't in prison. You could be here now to help me with the garden. I so much amiss the plant of the tomatoes and things like that. Father gets a return letter from the son. Dad, he goes, whatever you do, he says, no digging near the shed. Now the son knows he's being monitored by the FBI and local police. A couple weeks later, a letter comes from the father to Tony in prison. Tony, I cannot believe it. He says, the police, they all come, he says, to the house. He says, they have a search warrant. They dig the whole back of the yard. Tony writes a reply letter. Dad, I'm trying to do everything I can. This is the best I can help you, he says, to get your garden started. Anyways, a little chicanery implied there. How many of you know how a metal detector works? Any clue? No? All right. Well, I have one here I'm going to show you. This is one of the latest. I have my photographer over there. Thank you, Sarah. Everyone say hello to Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Sarah's like my Vanna White. Okay. Crime scene investigator. I can't even find where the zipper is to open this up. Okay, don't tell anybody. We're not on camera, are we, Tony? Hey, this here is one of the most technologically advanced metal detectors that are out right now. And this here is a Garrett CSI Pro. And what's nice about this machine, besides the fact that it's ergonomically balanced, lightweight, will last probably about 35 to 70 hours on 8 AA batteries. It's waterproof to 14 feet, okay? Meaning that the person that's using this can also use it for shallow water search. It also comes complete with headphones. And the reason why we have headphones for twofold purpose. You conserve at approximately 50% of the battery life by using headphones. The second reason is it also helps you to hear targets that are deeply buried. A faint blip of the audio tone that you might not otherwise hear with the other background or environmental noises. So I always like to metal detect with headphones. They do have headphones for this that are waterproof, so I can take this to the full 14 feet. However, I better have a breathing supply to go with me. But this machine here is very lightweight and ergonomic. Let me just take and get the coupling in here. Okay. This actually works on a radio frequency. This here is a radio transmitter, the box. Puts out an audio tone that goes through the coil wire down to the coil. And in turn, it puts that radio frequency almost like in a U shape down below the ground, like this. So it's like a transmit-receive. But this actually works on a very low frequency. It transmits between 7, typically metal detectors transmit between 7 and 30 kilohertz. Most machines generally between 7 and 15, some, depending on the manufacturer, 15 to 30 kilohertz. That's just the frequency of the radio signal being put in the ground. What happens is, when that radio signal underneath the coil comes down and comes in contact with a metallic object, there's a loss of current, which we refer to as the eddy current phenomena. That metal, in essence, soaks up that radio signal. And that radio signal goes back up to the metal detector, to the housing, and tells it that there's a loss of current, which means that there's metal below the coil. These machines today are so technologically advanced, I receive both an audio tone and a digital readout, anywhere from 0 to 100, and it's broken down by scales. And this particular machine right here is broken down by caliber. 22 caliber shell, 25 caliber, 38 round, 45. If it's bigger than that, I don't think I want to dig it up. Anyways, it'll tell me on the side over here, and I'll let you look at the equipment after, we'll have show and tell. It tells me the depth that the object is actually buried below the coil. In the center, there's a pinpoint button that I hold in and depress that pinpoints the exact center below this coil where the object is buried. So there's very, very little guesswork involved. The only thing that you have to do is, once you pinpoint it, is dig the object up. So in essence, just think of the metal detector as being a radio sending unit. Takes the frequency, puts it through the coil wire to the coil, and transmits it into the ground. Now, when that signal goes down, it's impervious to roots, rocks, concrete, wood. It'll go right around that in a linear fashion to its signal length and come back. Again, once it comes in contact with metal, it registers there's a loss of current because that metal is sucking up that current. And that's what tells you that you found something metallic, either ferrous or non-ferrous. Who knows the difference between the different metals, ferrous and non-ferrous? No? You want to give it a shot? Non-ferrous. Yeah, it's a poor conductor. Gold, copper, silver, platinum. Give me some examples, Sarah, of ferrous. Iron, steel. Okay, those are very, very good conductors. And what typically happens on this machine is it also has an audio tone identifier. So aside from the digital readout, you have audio tone. A lot of your ferrous metals will come in a low tone. And I'll describe it on a video clip that I have. Any of your shell casings will come with a medium tone range, medium to high, and anything like gold, copper, silver will be a higher pitched sound. So you have your digital readout, which gives you information, real time, then you have your audio tone. And again, the reason why we use headphones is it cuts down on environmental interference outside. Also conserves battery life on the metal detector. And with this metal detector now, you can take it out, whereas a couple years ago, you couldn't take it out because the housing was very sensitive to inclement weather, to rain, moisture, things like that. This can go right into the water, salt or fresh water, up to 14 feet. So I'll leave this machine out. Anybody has any questions later on, feel free to come up, can ask some questions. By the way, I have a few more icebreakers thrown in here as we go along. Icebreakers, Dr. Oxley, those are I refer to as my little jokes. And they seem to be receptive. I mean, all things considered, we're here on a Friday. That's the other thing I wanted to ask you. How many of you, let's be truthful, would be here on a late Friday afternoon at the University of Rhode Island if you did not have to be? God bless you. God bless you. One out of the whole crowd. I found the power to go on. It's very, very difficult. I used to be here in class at the university on Fridays, and it was a task. And this Pastori Hall happens to be one of the hottest rooms. Although this fan is helping out, I can remember when temperatures were soaring over 100 degrees.
I missed it earlier. What was the depth it goes to?
That question was not asked, and I'm glad you asked that. That is one of the biggest questions asked, the most frequently asked question. How deep will a metal detector go? And there's no given answer to that. Reason being is, typically, for say a hobbyist, when you're out looking for coins or a relic, you take the coil, put it on top of the ground, measure from here to here. This is approximately 7 inches, maybe 8 inches. That'll go down between 8 to 10 inches in depth to that object on something the size of maybe a quarter. Again, it depends on conductivity of that metal. There are environmental factors to take in consideration. I'm going on a hunt tomorrow. I belong to a club in Taunton, Mass. We're going to a site where the Pilgrims came from Plymouth, Mass. During the 1600s across the Taunton River. Farm fields, never been hunted by a metal detector before, so I'm waiting with bated breath like I did back in 1989. It's raining out. What happens when rain, moisture gets into the ground with metallic objects that are in the ground? What do you think what happens? Especially like ferrous metals, like iron. What happens sometimes when you're out and you dig up or kick up a ground, you see like an iron object? What happens around it? Speak up. Yeah, that, and also, too, it puts out an imaginary halo. When you think of the planets like Saturn, you see like rings. You have oxidation going on, and that water coming down reacts with the metal, and it puts out a halo effect. So that target signature is actually going to be higher than that piece of metal itself. Say if it was a railroad spike, and you got the rain, and now that halo's coming out, that object's going to seem like twice or 3 times its size. So after rainfall is the best time to go out and actually do hunting. Thank you. On an object the size of a gas can with a smaller coil like this, they have different size coils that you can actually put on these. And I brought along one to show you. Actually, I have one that I did not bring. I thought I did, but I took the small one that's on there. They actually have coils that are actually elliptical that are 14 inches by about 10, large like that. They're a little harder to detect with, but they'll go down on something the size of a gas can, about 2.5 feet. And they have an object they make that goes up to the metal detector, not this particular unit. It's called a depth multiplier. It's a 2-box sending unit with a bar in between, with a transmit-receive coil that's rectangular shaped, and you walk along. You just put the metal detector, slips onto the house, and you walk along, and that is strictly for ferrous metals. That will go down 15 to 20 feet on mass objects. Another thing to take into consideration, I'll talk about a crime scene that I was at back in 2003. I mentioned about environmental factors. Overhead power lines raise havoc with electronic equipment. And I will show you, well, I was hoping to show you, but part of my PowerPoint, the CD, will not open. We don't know why. The last time I played it was on an FBI computer. I think they did something to it. I'm not sure. I didn't have a patent, so I don't think I have a leg to stand on. But anyways, was out in Burrowville, Rhode Island. We were looking for the body of a 5-year-old boy that had been missing for 28 years. And overhead, I consider this to be one of the most challenging sites I've been to. We had the local police, Burrowville. We had Webster, Mass. Police. I was there because it was state property. I was also working to help the FBI's evidence response team. They came in with about 32 members of their evidence response team, which can be assigned to go anywhere in the country or the world on a moment's notice. I actually had the distinction of working with them even before they had the name Evidence Response Team going back to 1994, and I'll talk about that after. But we had the high power lines, 115,000 kVA, which is a measurement of current going through there. Massive amounts of electricity. The metal detector was erratic. Didn't really have a strong signal. The needle would go up, it would go down. We had a high water table. We had to bring in the power company to tell us where the ground wires were for these massive towers, because we were using a backhoe where the cadaver dog was pegging on human scent. They would dig down test holes, and they had to be careful. We actually went over to the vehicles, response vehicles parked on the sides of this area, which was just a wooded area going down with terrain, and there's rocks. It was the worst area. We were shocked going into the vehicle. I actually got a slight shock going in and touching the door handle of the vehicle. That's how much electricity was in the air. So I talk about environmental factors. That can play a role. With that, I can talk about it now because it was on the CD, which we know that the feds may have borrowed from me and haven't let it back yet. That was in 1994. I came right out of the crime lab here with my newfound knowledge. Wanted to put it to test. And with my years of experience metal detecting, Major of State Police said, David, we've got the State Police Detective Division formed a new unit called the Auto Theft Task Force. And their primary job was to go out and track vehicles that had been stolen and false information given to insurance companies. Well, they had received information from a woman who had a nasty custody battle with her boyfriend. They had a child together. She lost custody. How many of you have heard the saying there that hell hath no fury like that of a woman scorned? Well, this was a clear-cut case of that. She lost custody of the child but swore she'd reap vengeance on the boyfriend. She said, oh, yeah? Well, you know that 1991 Dodge Ram pickup truck that he reported stolen to the insurance company? She said, it's buried in the backyard, 15 feet down. Well, it was plausible. Motive was, he was a finagler. He wanted insurance money. He had opportunity. Was in the construction business. He owned a backhoe. So state police obtained a search warrant. And the day we got to the site, it was in Coventry, right near Johnson's Pond. So they brought me in twofold for my metal detecting expertise and also because of the environmental crimes. You had a potentially hazardous situation with a vehicle that had transmission fluid, gas, antifreeze, buried in the backyard right near a wetland, Johnson's Pond. Well, it was like a dog and pony show. The media was there, state police was there, local police was there. You had the Department of Public Works with their heavy equipment was there. And I get out and I had what they call a pulse induction machine. It's like a box machine that puts out a signal through a shaft. Looks like a cane, but it's got a square box on the top. And it only picks up on ferrous metals. And I figured that this was the choice rather than a metal detector because of the depth of the object. And I wish I had slides. I had pictures in my one of the books I brought. But it doesn't do us any good right now. And I'm scanning the area. There's an area, and I'm getting a beep. And the pulse induction would go, and it'd stop. It would null. And then it would scream again. And what would happen is, with the machine, it would null when you get over the center of the object. And it would scream as soon as you got away from the object. So I had 4 stakes with me, 8 feet apart, 20 feet down. I put them in the ground. State police came over and says, what do you think? I says, I can't tell you what's in the ground. I can tell you with certainty there is something metallic between these stakes. He said, are you sure? I said, sure as my reputation. I said, I'm telling you, I've been doing this for years. There's something here. I can't tell you. It could be a washing machine. So they brought in the backhoe. And, of course, you always get the pucker factor, and people looking at you like, is this guy legit? Does he know what he's doing? And they're digging down. You've got all these resources committed. And I'm like, oh, yeah, looking with confidence. And inside I'm actually going, oh, God, please, let me find something. All of a sudden they're digging down. All of a sudden, unmistakable sound of the tines on the backhoe crunching into metal. I went, oh, please, let this be it. comes up about 6 feet down, comes up with a red section of cab. And the girlfriend says, the pickup truck was red. It was red. It was red. And lo and behold, after about 15 minutes, they had the entire truck exposed. State police, one of the detectives got down there, got underneath the chassis of the vehicle after they pulled it out, took the VIN numbers there, and it was a positive match. So that individual was charged with reporting falsification of a false report, insurance fraud, and also we hit him with a myriad of environmental statutes for burying that vehicle in the vicinity of a wetland. And that was their very first search warrant. So thanks to me, I helped make them look good. They were successful. Yes?
And tell me, did you get the child back?
I don't know if she got the child, but I thought you were going to ask me. The most asked question is, with Dodge's reputation, I told people, I said, the truck was still running. They go, really? I said, yeah, the truck was ram tough. But I don't know if she did. She may have, but she made his life miserable. So that was in 1994. And shortly after that, we had another case. The Major State Police, who I was friendly with, James Raleigh, at the time, knew of my love of history, metal detecting, said, David, the FBI is going out in central Coventry. They're going to be executing a search warrant. I don't know much about it, he says, but this has an international connection, something to do with Mexico. And somebody was allegedly abducted. They were holding for ransom, and they ended up finding a body. Long story short, this was just prior to the FBI formulating an evidence response team. They had a handful of agents from the Providence RA and Boston office. They had a 60-acre parcel of property in central Coventry. The owner of the property had founded a business, a large computer company, and I guess it was taken over. And they sent a gentleman down to Mexico where Mr. Hughes' wife was from. I don't know if it's Matamoros, Mexico, somewhere around there. But Mr. McCarthy was going down just to tell him, hey, thanks, but, you're no longer needed by the company, and it didn't go very well. A few days later, a ransom note came back up to Rhode Island saying that we want almost $400,000 for his safe return. The only problem is, a day or two later, they found Mr. McCarthy's body in a shallow alfalfa field riddled with bullets from a 9mm, and they found 3 shell casings next to the body. Had robbery been the motive for this crime, then certainly his laptop would not have been beside him, his sneakers still on him, his personal effects. All these things were there. It was clearly revenge. It was a homicide. So they found that Hughes owned this tract of land, had a farm in central Coventry with over 60 acres. A little further investigation showed he purchased a 9mm handgun several months prior from a gun store in Warwick. So working on the theory that he had no other registered firearms, that maybe he took this firearm out on the farm and did a little practicing. Well, sure enough, we went out, we met at State Police Headquarters in Scituate, went to this location in central Coventry, came up upon the farm, executed the search warrant, and immediately I went out there off the back door figuring that, there's a large pond out the back. This would have been an ideal area for somebody shooting across there. And within probably maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I found the first of 8 shell casings, 9mm, and also 2 spent bullets in the ground, to the amazement of the FBI agents. They were amazed that I found these so quick. And they said, how'd you do this? And I said, well, remember what I told you before about metal detecting? It's a perishable skill. I've been doing this. I had thousands and thousands of hours. I've been doing this as a hobby. Now I was able to segue it into law enforcement and criminal justice. Long story short, they took these shell cases down through a chain of custody back down to Mexico, to the Mexican National Police, and found out that they matched positively with those that they found next to the body. So they said it was the most incriminating evidence in solving that crime. So Mr. Hughes, I think, received 20 years in the Mexican prison. And the last I heard, he escaped somehow and found his way back to Rhode Island to do his time here. Crazy how things work out. Anyways, how are we doing time-wise? I have a PowerPoint here, and I don't want to bore you too much with PowerPoints. I really wished I could have opened up the CD, but I do have some video of a search warrant that I executed back in 1995.
You have a CD you can't open?
We had the tech people here, doctor, and they weren't That's the one I was talking about, the FBI. I used it on their computer, worked fine. Now it doesn't work. So, excuse me? I guess he saw it, but for some reason they could not open it up. Oh, okay. Because there was a tremendous amount of photographs and everything on here. This is the one I did.
You don't want to lose it anyway if we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. All right, I hate coming up here to a podium here, but we're behind the times here. I understand we're going to be getting technologically advanced, but it's going to be after today's presentation. I have to come up and actually have to toggle over on the keyboard here for the PowerPoint. Also, we used to have a remote, which we don't have. Okay, metal detectors operation mode. They can operate in two different modes. I mentioned there's an all-metal mode and there's a discriminate mode. And what you should know about the all-metal, do those computers actually take pictures of the screen as we're going along here? Can you do that with the laptop? Can you take pictures? Yeah. I'm just curious. Can you actually take a picture from that? Oh, all right. Wow, I'm so old school. It's amazing. But someday my communication skills are going to be sought after. People are going to say, how do we communicate? You know? To go into what, please? Over this way? Thank you. It's been a while. Okay. Two modes you can operate a metal detector in. All metal and discriminatory. All metal is self-explanatory. When you go into an area, you're searching for evidence, you want to find anything of forensic value, you want to dig it up. I do the same thing when I go to a historical site, not on private property, no U.S. parks. I always ask permission, but if I'm in an area where I want to dig, and if it's anything of interest, I go all metal, no discrimination. It goes deeper, and it'll find any type of metallic object, whether it be ferrous or non-ferrous. Discrimination, you can actually set up. If I'm in an area such as a park area, and I want to take and notch out flip tops, old nails, foil, I can actually do that. I can have a setting on there. One of the digital units, I can actually toggle over and put an icon. Anything below that range, it won't detect. But anything above that, it will find, such as in the coin range or in the shell case in this instance. These metal detectors actually are so sophisticated, if I went into an area the size of a football field and wanted to find just this wedding band, I could actually run it below the coil, get the target value on that, set an icon, and go in that field. It'll find only metal with that property of gold, AU, in that whole entire area. And it'll take and null out all the other objects. That was actually done at a crash site where a young serviceman was killed in an F-16 jet fighter. And they had a team of forensic scientists come in, and I guess someone used a metal detector. And I guess his grieving widow, the only thing she really wanted back was his wedding band as a memento. And this team went in, and I guess this gentleman was very experienced, went in and actually found and recovered the wedding band from that crash site. So it was quite the story. Okay, so you got two different types of modes, all metal, discriminatory, discrimination. Sensitivity has to do with depth. You've got a sensitivity mode, which actually translates to depth. The deeper you go on a metal detector, the more background noise you're going to have. It's chatter. It's sort of like, anybody use digital cameras? The higher the pixel range, the more noise you get. The same thing equates with that there. You can go deeper, but you're going to get a lot of chattering, so you may want to turn it down. But you can go, also background noise will be affected by soil mineralization. These machines today have a background setting on there. We can actually go in and set your metal detector for the mineralization of that particular area. Beaches are the worst because of that black sand, like at low tide. A lot of people like to go down. it raises havoc with most metal detectors. These metal detectors have a setting on them where you can actually take the coil up and down, pump it a couple times with your ground balance mode, and it actually sets it for that background. So it'll go in there fluidly and find metallic objects without going all over and making crazy noises. Okay, depth. Again, on this meter right here, we show up to 12 inches. It depends. People always ask, how deep will a metal detector go? Again, it depends on the size of the coil. It depends on environmental factors. Has it rained like today? Best time to go out will be tomorrow, hopefully. And 12 inches is not unusual for something the size of a quarter or a shell casing. But you can go deeper depending on the mineralization of the soil. If there's less mineralization, it will go deeper. You can pinpoint, and these metal detectors actually tell you, an icon on the side tells you exactly how deep that target is. It takes all the guesswork out. The only thing you have to do is pinpoint and dig up the object. When you're holding a metal detector, what you want to do is, I tell people, you want to keep it about 1 inch or 2 above the ground. I'll demonstrate it for you. They also tell you that these metal detectors were made of rugged construction. Okay, just want to say that with the headphones dropping. What you want to do is stand like this. You want to take and have that coil a couple inches, put it over here and I'll do it over there, a couple inches above the ground. And you're going to make an imaginary figure 8, side to side. Just like this. Not like this. Just nice and easy, back and forth. You want to cover approximately 3 feet. Okay? And when you move over, there's different ways to search in a crime scene area. You can take and do it in a grid, back and forth. You want to step over, and you want to take and overlap. You want to take and go over so that you're going to overlap the previous line. Again, I'll show you over here. A couple inches above the ground. Nice and easy, imaginary figure 8. Back and forth. And when that target, that radio signal comes down below that coil, comes in contact with the metal, it's going to register digitally, and also you're going to get an audio blip in your headphones. And once I do that, I can get an idea of the value. If it's brass, the size of the target. If it's lead, it'll tell me the approximate size of the projectile. I hit the target button, pinpoint. It pinpoints the exact center below this coil where I'm supposed to dig. We have special tools for digging. I'll show you. With search, it's up to the individual, how you feel comfortable. You can do a grid pattern, what I call mowing the lawn. Back and forth, back and forth. Once you go that way, you can start the opposite direction, coming back, like fertilizing with the old drop buckets. After the rain, you can always tell the spots you missed. With the broadcast spreaders, it's much easier. They overlap. So also another way, too, is if you have a fixed object, or if not, you can take a stake, put it in the ground, and go around in circles, and have a rope. And when that rope comes back around after so many winds, it brings you in closer and closer. So finally, you're back into the point of where you put the stake, so you're covering a concentric area. It's all up to the individual, how you feel comfortable. But if you're searching an area with a metal detector, it will detect. I'm looking at the clock. I'm saying, God, I hope it's not 5 o'clock. Anything metallic. Anything that's metallic, whether it be ferrous or non-ferrous. Non-ferrous, gold, copper, silver, platinum. I think aluminium, another name for aluminum, fits in that category. Ferrous, steel, iron, those things. Anything in those ranges, it will pick up. Rocks, dirt, branches, wood are not a hindrance. That signal will go around that in a linear fashion till it reaches its length of its signal and come back and report. Again, when that signal, radio signal, comes in contact with a piece of metal, it dances on the surface. We call that an eddy current phenomenon. And that metal almost, in an imaginary way, soaks up part of that signal and reports back to the receiver saying there's a loss of signal, which means there's a metal object below that coil. Let's see. Has anybody here ever had the opportunity to use a metal detector? Have you? Yeah? Have any luck? It takes a little time and patience. It does, but it's a fantastic hobby, and that's how I started into it. Aside from the hobby, I mean, today with the prices of gold and silver, and don't forget, a lot of people will be coming back like in the old days. They didn't have banks. Well, the old-timers didn't believe in them or didn't trust in banks, so they would take and bury things on their property. Today, people revert back to the same way. They're taking things of value, they're cashing, burying on the property. So they estimate that there are more coins either purposely buried or accidentally lost in this country than there are in circulation by the U.S. Mint. And another thing you ask yourself is, when you find something of value, why is it that you find like a coin 13, 14 inches down in the ground? They did a study. When you take an object and place it on the ground, such as a coin, through tilth, vegetation, and natural decay from the environmental process, that only attributes to a 1/16 of an inch a year. However, there are other things at play. You have frost heave, okay? In the springtime we get that. You have cracks, the ground opens up, things of weight fall, gravity takes effect. But also, too, back in the old days, people plowed, they tilled the ground. That's why a lot of metal detectors, when you see them, they're out in old cornfields. That's where they find a lot of the colonial relics. Because the fields, like the ocean, continually things are coming up. They come up, they go back down. They come up, same thing with the ocean. Hurricane Sandy. It was an ideal opportunity for people to detect around the ocean. Things that had been buried for hundreds of years were churned up from the ocean bottom and brought up to the surface along the shoreline. Again, until the next storm came along, it would take that and take it back. It's a continuum. So the best time to go out is after a storm because it takes all those old artifacts and dredges them up and brings them back. It's a continuation. Same thing with the ground. Frost heave, plowing. No luck, doctor?
It says it has 0 kilobytes in that file. So the opinion of the experts is whoever copied onto this copied the link and not the actual file.
Oh.
Because there's no kilobytes of data in here to look at.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
0 kilobytes. Okay. Well, then we'll just have to, I was telling someone earlier there, how many of you seen that movie, Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood? Good movie. None of you? Come on. Great flick. He tells his young Marines under he's a sergeant, gunnery sergeant. He tells them, adapt, improvise, overcome. Okay? That's my motto. So I'm going to improvise. There's a scale. I mentioned about the numerical scale would be at the top. When you're going over an object and you're over the dead center, that whole bar graph on the top of that screen right there is going to fill up with all black bars. It's going to go across. When you get away from the center of that object, the bars are going to disappear. When you go back over with the coil, they're going to fill up again. That means you're exactly over the center. And if you want to take and double check, push your pinpoint on the metal detector, hold it in the tactile switch with your thumb, and it's going to make a loud audio tone. When you go away from the center of the object, the audio tone is going to diminish. When you get closer to it, it's going to go back up. Okay, these are things you really don't need to know going through here. I mentioned about its uses. A metal detector, don't think of it in terms of one-dimensional. Don't think of it being used just on the ground. It can also be used in snow. I redeemed myself. I've spent thousands of hours out there in the hobby when I could have been doing home remodeling and things with the kids, although I balance things out. And one day I had a chance to redeem myself. My wife says, all right, Mr. Metal Detector expert. She says, I've lost one of my cherished earrings at the middle school for the kids. Well, we just had a wallapalooza of a snowstorm. We had about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. And it was piled up the entrance of the school. To me, I says, small problem. I went out there, cranked up the machine. That's another thing, too, we'll mention about storage of electronics. They're sensitive to extremes of heat or cold. They're very forgiving, but if you get something like minus 30 or 40, you don't want that in the back of a trunk. On the converse side, you don't want to leave that in the trunk when you're at Scarborough Beach. Although it should be out with you as you're walking along the beach, right? Instead of zapping on that suntan oil, right? Finding treasures. Within a couple moments, I got a signal on the meter. I went, yes. put my hand down inside the snowbank and pulled up that little earring. So you know who was golden. Anyways, it was good to give something back. My wife has been very, very patient. For many years in my job at the Department of Environmental Management and to law enforcement, I purchased the equipment out of pocket. I did training on my own time often, to the point where they actually saw that I was providing a valuable service and actually helping out departments there. Then they started allocating money and resources came in, but it's something I love doing. And again, I've been doing this since 1994. I've worked with the local police, many municipal agencies, state police. I've worked with the dive team. In 1994 with the FBI, I worked with their evidence response team, solving an international murder. In 2000, they actually had me come on board doing full-time training for their evidence response team. To me, that was quite an accolade. But it's just something I love doing. It's second nature. And I love taking the time out. I've been to schools. I take my cannonballs I found, colonial coins, rings, artifacts. I take them to the school, and you'd be surprised how many children want to be young archaeologists. And there's a downside to this. I get phone calls after from little Susie or Johnny's mother or father going, "Hey, were you the guy who was at the school talking about treasure hunting?" This? I said, "Yes." "Well, so-and-so wants me to buy a machine. How much is that going to cost me?" You know? And I told him, I said, "Very reasonable." I said, "Or you go to a link, you can find it used." But the children are so eager to want to learn because everything in a child's mind, even if it's a piece of innocuous junk, is treasure. And a secondary thing from that is they want to read. They want to study up on that little artifact or that coin. They want to know who last held that. So it's a tremendous thing. It really is. I can't say enough about it from a hobby perspective in law enforcement. And by the way, not every crime scene I've been to have I been successful. I'll be the first to admit it. And I used to be very frustrated with going to a scene because, you have a lot of eyes looking upon you, and, you want to do your best. You want to help that department succeed and find the evidence they need to take and bring charges against a murder suspect or a criminal. But then I rationalized to myself. I said, you're not always going to find things because sometimes, and I'll give you a case in point in a moment, a crime maybe didn't take place there. Or maybe there's no trace evidence. In which case, I would look at the scene saying, okay, now we can eliminate this scene from our focus and dedicate the resources somewhere else. So we just check that area off. So to me, it wasn't necessarily a loss. Case in point, 2003, we're down at Scusset Beach on the Cape. How many are familiar with Scusset Beach? The Cape, Wareham, in that area? It was like February, the coldest day imaginable, the wind coming off the water. Of all things, we got a tip, the state police in Massachusetts and the FBI. Whitey Bulger, his girlfriend, and the pet poodle were shot and buried in the parking lot at Scusset Beach. Okay, this is before we knew they were living comfortably in California, $800,000 buried in big rolls in the walls along with all his weapons. And we're out there. They brought the cadaver dogs in. They were using the rods to aspirate the ground, bring up the odor from the decaying bodies or whatever. They had a witness come in and said with such conviction, and this person was of Italian-American descent. Any Italians in here? All right, be proud of it. Put that hand up. All right. Yeah, but he said it with such conviction. The Italians have a thing of talking with their hands, much like I do. I'm not Italian, but I did hang around with them a lot and was well fed over the years. Anyways, was telling the story. Yeah, they came in, they shot Whitey. They shot his girlfriend. And they even killed her poodle. And the guy passed out. He fell down, blacked right out. And they said, God, this guy's got to be telling the truth. But we went down there. We spent hours that whole day searching the area. They brought in the FBI's evidence response team from Quantico. They used a ground-penetrating radar, going over the area, mapping out a grid. Nothing. And a few years later, we found out he was living comfortably with his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, in California. But again, that was one of those cases where you don't know, but you get the resources out, and you go to the area and you focus it. Hey, are we due for another icebreaker? I think we are. The audiences are getting younger and younger, and I'm a baby boomer. And I think there are a couple here, aside from myself, that are baby boomers, but I'm seeing a lot of millennium generation. How many are millennium? Do you even know what millennium is? I think it's from fetus to like 23, is it? Or no, 33. Okay, millennium generation. Then you have generation Y, then X, then you have old farts like me. But I was going to tell a joke about the Lone Ranger in Tonto. How many of you even know who the Lone Ranger is? Oh, thank God we have a few. But anyways, pretend you know. I don't know any of the superheroes, or I'd use them for telling the story. And the point about this is about sometimes in the world of evidence, we look far and wide for that which sometimes is right below our view. One day, in fact, I told this joke to a very famous person. How many of you are familiar with Dr. Henry Lee, a forensic scientist? Well, Dr. Lee was here. He was one of our guest presenters at Cherry Hall. Remember Dr. Oxley? And I had the opportunity to meet him beforehand, being our guest presenter, and we talked. And very congenial person, very affable. And I told him the story about the Lone Ranger in Tonto, and he promised, he says, I will not forget that. He says, I will use this. Well, one day they were trekking across the desert, and nightfall came, and I guess they were very tired, so they set up camp. They tied their horses down, made sure they had water, put a pot of coffee on. Finally, the Lone Ranger says, Tonto, he says, let's retreat, go to the tent, get a good night's rest, we'll head out early in the morning. He goes, okay, Kimosabe, which was a terminology they used back then there. Tonto was of Native American descent, and so they were hunkered down for the night. All of a sudden, about 3 o'clock in the morning, the Lone Ranger wakes up. He goes, Tonto. He goes, yes, Kimosabe. He says, look up and tell me what you see. He says, oh, Kimosabe, he says, astronomically speaking, tell me millions of planets. He goes, no, millions of stars, potentially billions of planets. Meteorologically speaking, tell me tomorrow going to be a beautiful day. Theologically speaking, tell me God, all infinite and wise, creator of all the world. What did it tell you, Kimosabe? He says, Tonto, for Christ's sakes. Somebody stole our tent. All right, there's your icebreaker. So the point of that is, sometimes we look far and wide for that which is right below our nose. All right, these are all technical things. So what I think I'm going to do is escape down to there. I have to come over here. Okay, videotape. In 1993, I think it was, I had been out assisting police departments far and wide with search warrants looking for evidence. And finally, my own agency says, hey, we have a gem here in the midst of us. Why don't we utilize him? We had information that this company that repaired large equipment, particularly forklifts, whatever, would take the equipment, would rehab it, would power wash it, and a lot of times this equipment with hydraulics and oils generate a lot of waste. So they would take, and supposedly, according to the witness, they had an illegal drain at the back of the property where all the sludge and oil and enzymes and whatever the harsh cleansers they were using were going into a holding tank right in the ground. Now, according to DEM's rules and regulations, this is illegal. You have to have that registered. So they were able to obtain a search warrant. They asked me, he said, hey, are you up to doing this? I said, sure. So we get to this business, and probably should click on it, but I'll tell you as we're going along here. I was a little bit hesitant because they just put a brand new parking lot in the back. And the area I was asked to search was right around the vicinity of that brand new parking lot, which meant if I was wrong, our agency would be liable for repairing or putting in a brand new parking lot for this business. But fortunately, I'll let you see how it played out. Okay. Does anybody see an icon to click on there to get this thing in motion? Arrow? You're invited. You know what? There's something in your future that I have in this box here for you. Thank you. Okay. Do we have volume control? Nope.
Oh, you're going down.
Nope, that's all over here?
Volume, yeah.
Nope.
Below it, the big triangle that you're clicking on?
Sure. Is there...
May not have, we have
Yeah. Old equipment. Anyways, let me take a narrate for you. This area out there, we had the workers working around the back. You can see the heavy equipment. There's an area right there. We located this right here. Okay, this is a drain, which was not permitted. Now, what I need to do is I need to take the metal detector, go over the area. I'm not the one with the camera, by the way. You can see all the sludge and everything that's accumulated there. We want to know where this is running into. It was nasty. So I had to take the metal detector, and I had to go over an area where the brand new tarmac for the parking lot and back was, on the other side of the cinder block. There I am. I think they got this sped up a little bit because either that or I had my third cup of coffee that morning. See, that's how sure I am. That was an earlier model metal detector I had. Oh, boy, here comes the part where you call conviction. When they bring in the jackhammer and you say, I pray to God that I'm right. This is the part where you really hope you're right when they bring in the backhoe. Now, like I said, it was a brand new parking lot, so they put it down pretty thick. And bear in mind that this is potentially, if they do have an underground tank that they're collecting this stuff into, that is a felony, which is a $25,000 fine and up to a year or more in prison. Now, you can tell the supervisors, they're the ones that are dressed nice with the suits and ties, and they're directing like Cecil B. DeMille, you know, the movie director. Okay, now as we're getting down past the parking lot, there's crushed stone, which they typically don't put below a bituminous surface when you do a parking lot. And you can see now, as the workers are coming in from the environmental contracting company, they're finding a metallic surface, which I was hitting on. Okay, you start to see that right there? Okay, that's what I was hitting on. Come over here, see if I can drag this along a little bit. We're going to have to help it around a little more. All right, there we go. There's a tank. You can see the holes in there. There's the line coming out, PVC. That was the drain line going into this tank. It was quite a large tank. Actually, I think it was from a tanker truck, possibly 1,000-gallon, and they just dug this hole out, and they buried the tank. They put all holes in it. They drilled it out so that everything would go in there and percolate out slowly, and they backfilled it with crushed rock. And now what they're doing here is they're cutting the PVC line to, in order to charge them, we have to show a direct correlation from the drain into the holding tank. So they use a dye solution, usually a phosphorus green dye. They'll pour that in, and as soon as they can see that going through the connection into that tank, then they've got their the proof they need, the PC for bringing the felony charge. Now watch. They just cut the end of that off. They knew that went into the tank right there. They're going to put the dye in there. All right, there we go. Let's help it along. How did it go back? This does not want to take and go forward, does it? I wanted you to get a shot of that view as the dye is actually going through the pipe and coming down, because that's where the toxic liquid would have been going into the tank. So they're able to make it. Now they're taking and going in and putting the hose in there, a vac truck, and they're going to take and pump all that out and put it into drums, all the toxic sludge. So anyways, the point of this is that the metal detector was used to find something metallic. Okay. You said if I hit escape, it should take it out of there, but I guess it's not. Okay. Through the use of the metal detection equipment, we had an area, suspect area. We were able to take that metal detector, go over the area. I hit on a target. I gridded it out, and a contractor company came in, Jackhammer's backhoe. In fact, we were lucky. We found the underground storage tank. That owner was charged with a felony. I believe it was a substantial fine, $25,000. There was no prison time meted out to him. I want to leave time for Q&A, but I'm going to take and tell you another story. This is one of the last cases I worked on towards the end of my career. I was a criminal investigator for almost 20 and a half years. I truly enjoyed working with the environment, working with children. I started an education program that never existed for the state of Rhode Island called the Junior Environmental Watchdog. I extracted a tremendous amount of joy from that. I work with children from K through 8 years of age, and even the youngest children are very alert, very in tune with the environment. I actually sit on a national committee after I retired called the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I'm on their Environmental Crimes Committee, and I was just able to recently contribute to an article that's going to have national and international publication, and I put a little plug in there for environmental education. So that was one of the other things I did, aside from doing my handcuffs and court dates. Because I always used to say, you cannot have a system that is strictly enforcement without having a component in there for education. You have to educate people. And I truly believe if you can take at least 2 generations, take children, have them grow up to become parents, take their children, educate them, we're going to bring around a sweeping change. One of the last cases I worked on was one that was very, very difficult. And I worked on a number of homicide cases, going in with state police and local police, looking for body remains and other objects of forensic evidence. And this had to do with a young man that just recently had served over in the Iraqi war. 20 years old, came back, no job. Girlfriend broke up with him. So one day, I guess he had a little something to drink, became despondent. His girlfriend broke up with him, went back to a spot in West Greenwich, not far from Division Road, where he and his friends used to take and spend time riding their dirt bikes and RVs, and decided he wanted to bring about an end to his life. Did not have a gun to his disposal, but truly was hell-bent on the idea of taking his life, and he finally succeeded. He took one of these pneumatic guns that carpenters use, construction people, with a .22 blank round that takes a nail and puts it into a thick piece of wood. You actually put it down with pressure and you hit the end with a hammer. And our environmental police, I guess someone had been off the wooded area, and they found this young man's body with a 16-penny nail driven into his brain. Actually took this thing, this pipe, took the hammer, and was able to detonate it. He lived for 2 days, agonizing death. And within a matter of 24 hours, they gridded off the area where the crime took place and could not find a single piece of evidence. So they contacted the Office of Criminal Investigation and asked for my services. And again, I've assisted many police departments over the years, and to me, I was just waiting for the opportunity to serve my own agency. And within a matter of maybe 15, 20 minutes, I went in there, and you go into a crime scene, you flag where your evidence is before just picking it up. You photograph it, number it, and we found probably a handful of the .22 cartridge casings that, as he was fumbling in his pocket trying to do this, also found change dropped in the area that were probably mixed in his pocket along with the cartridge casings. And I actually found a couple of spent bullets that probably were nothing related, but were probably from hunters from years before. I'd been out in the area hunted. But in a matter of 24 hours, that evidence just sifted through the leaves and the pine nettles, and just gravity taking its place just dropped below. And they couldn't find it with the human eye. So I went out there with the metal detector, pegged right on it, flagged it, found it. But that was probably one of the sadder cases that I can think of. We've got about 15 minutes left here, and I'm trying to think. I don't think I have any more icebreakers, but I need to have some questions, though. I want to take and save time for Q&A. Also, I want to let you know, too, Garrett Metal Detectors out of Garland, Texas. They're a tremendous company. They're family-owned, American-made. I've been working with them closely for the past 20 years. They've provided educational materials. I've gone to the schools to do training, rearing up the next generation of Indiana Jones archaeologists with pass-outs, booklets, books on treasure, all the law enforcement seminars I've performed and conducted. They've always provided booklets. I have some very, very nice pass-out materials up here. This one right here is called Lost Treasure.
Does it have treasure maps in it?
I tore those out, Dr. Oxley. Those are for my private collection. But these are for anybody that's interested in getting the hobby. It's called Lost Treasures. Come up and please help yourself to them. We have a catalog for the security division on portal devices for Garrett. Okay. We have Pro Pointers. This is something I wanted to show you as well. There's a miniature device called a Pro Pointer that, to me, is invaluable. It's a miniaturized metal detector. It can be used for personal security. It has an LED light on the front. It has an audible tune. See if it picks up on my St. Michael's medal. No, actually, that was my heart. I have a heart of gold. Anyways, use it for security purposes. Somebody at a crime scene, if you want to make sure they're armed or not. If you're digging into an area where you suspect that there's a shell casing or a spent bullet, you'd be surprised. You say, well, wouldn't you be able to see it? No. Many times it camouflages or works itself into the background of the soils. This right here cuts down on time immeasurably. If I go over the pile of soil, and sometimes, too, if I want to be careful about an area I'm digging, I'll take like an old Frisbee, and I'll take the soil out once I pinpoint it, put it on top of the Frisbee, go over it with this right here, and boom. As soon as I get the metallic object, and I take the soil, put it back with surgical precision, take that little clump, and by the way, there's a way you can cut the grass and fold it back and put it back in place so that you don't take and scar the area or mess up someone's landscaping. Especially if you're doing it as a hobby, you want to make sure you go in with surgical precision and leave the area better than when you left, picking up trash, flip tops, broken glass. But I can go in, you wouldn't be able to tell I was even in there. I'd make like a little V cut, I fold it back. Usually what you're looking for is going to be under the grass line, right where the root line is, where it meets the soil. Just take the object out, get a screwdriver or a little digging tool. Speaking of digging tools, we have a special tool here that I use for that. And I want everybody to come up afterwards to grab some pamphlets and also to ask some questions. We have a special heavy-duty digger. Okay, it has serrated edges. Could be used as a defense weapon, too, if you're out in the woods by yourself, but it's a great digging tool, okay? And this is for a lot of times you encounter roots and things below the ground. It cuts into them and just really cuts down on the work there. It's got a nice rubber grip handle. And with this kit is always loaded to go. And I'm going to show you something that is probably one of the most essential things to have. That is besides toilet paper when you're out miles out into the woods. That would be batteries. And I've been out at a site, an old foundation site, and, the colonists didn't think that we're going to make things easy for Dave Thatcher. We're going to take and put our foundation home site 300 years old, knowing that he'll come along hundreds of years later right near the main road so he doesn't have to walk or work very far. But sometimes I'm a couple miles into the woods, and I've caught myself without batteries, and that is the worst feeling. So I always carry extra batteries with me. And for storage, too, when you're storing a metal detector, if it's going to not be used for more than 6 months at a time, take the battery compartment out, take the batteries out. Because batteries, although the batteries today are engineered much better than years ago, they have a better storage life. Take the batteries out so there's no chance of batteries leaking, working their way into the electronic compartments. A machine like this probably is about $700. I've had machines that cost up to $1,500. There are some machines out there that cost up to $5,000. So take care of it. They're very forgiving. They're made of ABS plastic, the same material they make the NFL football helmets out of. They'll take, jostling, knocking down. But you have to use care, because they are electronics. And with this machine here, what I like about it is it's waterproof. So now I can go out when it's drizzling, get a light mist. I can take it into the salt water. I can take it into fresh water, search with it. But anyways, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Q&A because I know there must be some questions out there. And, yes?
I've got a 200-year-old mill house.
See, I'm interested already. Now I'm listening. Here's my attention.
Concrete floor was put in maybe 100 years ago. Would the signal penetrate the concrete floor?
Well, first of all, you help me out with the computer, you get one of these. I have more. I don't want to have to be like a dentist to extract, have you guys ask questions. Here you go. You're welcome. Yes, it will. And I started telling you before about the metal detector. Don't think of it in terms of being one-dimensional. We think of it as being in a plane of using it parallel with the ground. It can also be used, and one day I was out with the FBI in Burrowville on a murder investigation, and I had mentioned about sometimes, looking up at trees or things like that where a sabot slug or a stray round could have impacted and gone into a tree trunk. And just then, one of the evidence response team members said, "Hey, over here," holding up the metal detector, and sure enough, someone got their knife out, and they dug out a sabot slug from a shotgun that had been impaled in the trunk. They were so impressed with that, they took that section of rotted tree and they cut it. They said, "We're bringing this back. We're going to use this for education." So that's another example. Also, too, they use it in partitions of homes. You can take the metal detector, go up and scan. Of course, today you have conduit, wiring, but if you have a cache, years ago people used to put things behind. Well, we know Whitey Bulger was hiding things in partitions. So, yeah, it can be used to scan walls, ceilings, attic floorboards. You let your imagination go wild. So the cat's out of the bag. Now that you know that I may have some treasures in here, I need more questions. Come on. Yes?
What do you do on weekends? Are you going to the beach and do this?
Well, I retired a year and a half ago, much to my wife's chagrin, and she's hoping I'll be gainfully employed soon. But tomorrow, I'll be going on an organized club hunt in Dayton, Massachusetts. So whenever I can, I do a balancing act. I love going out. I found a number of military artifacts. I have the foundation behind me where I found military buttons, regular buttons. Like I said, I'd like you folks to come up here. I have a number of things. I have colonial keys from the 1700s. These are all objects I found just literally right out in the backyard, old sites. I always ask permission. I will not trespass on private property. If I don't know who the property owner is, I may go to a door to knock over to ask somebody. But yeah, no, every chance I get because there's so much history around. I found, I think I told you, I found the George Washington inauguration button, which was worth $5,000. I put the Village of Hope in Scituate, Rhode Island on the map. Back in 1985, I found out the Browns from Brown University started a blast furnace, not to make pots and pans, but actually to make cannon and cannonball to fight the British. I spent 5 years research and found out where they test fired their cannons across the Patuxent River. I found over 34 cannonballs. But the hobby part of it is as exciting for me as crime scenes are. Thank you. Someone else over there had a question? You don't need a hat? All right, well, that means we got more questions. Somebody else over there had a question. Yes?
Yeah, you mentioned at one of the crime scenes using, I think you said ground penetrating radar.
Yes, that was another thing I was going to talk about, but we ran out of time there.
I was just wondering
Well, ground penetrating radar basically is, it puts a radio signal out, much the same way a metal detector does in frequency, puts it below the ground. What it does is it picks up anomalies. It does not give you a 3D picture of looking below the ground and saying, there's a pirate chest. There's a buried body. It shows anomalies that occur with hyperboles in the image. And it can be used for conduit. The utility companies use it for finding underground pipe, things like that. It can be used for doing geological surveys to find bedrock. Here you go. For bedrock, when DOT comes in, they want to put a new highway in or they want to put an addition on. There's an electromagnetic induction unit, which looks like a bar. It's a big transmit-receive with a little computer pad in the middle. That is a profiler, and it samples the soil. That picks up on soil stratification, changes in the soil. It is not better than ground-penetrating radar, but the two pieces of equipment work in tandem with one another to give you as much information as possible. Interesting story. Back about 15 years ago, National Geographic did an article. I think it was in Iceland. They had a group of P-51 Mustangs crash-landed in Iceland. They ran out of fuel. They abandoned the planes with their machine guns and everything. Over time, what happens? Nature takes over. They went over with ground-penetrating radar down 25 feet. They found magnetic targets. They said it's possible that this is the fighter group. They found 5 P-51 Mustangs in perfect condition, frozen in the original state with the machine guns, with the ammunition still in the 50 caliber machine guns. They actually dug down and they excavated them, took them out. They're now in museums. So what a ground penetrating radar will show you, it will show you an image with anomalies, with a line with variations, hyperbolas. If there's pipe, it'll show you the pipe. It can tell you if it's conduit or metal. It'll show you the void in between that. It won't show you something 3D to say, oh, there's a body there. I can see the body. You'll see an image that appears to be like a void, and the profile, electromagnetic profile, actually shows you better than the ground penetrating radar changes in the soil, stratification, what they call soil morphology. When they bury a body, you don't take and put the same mixture of soil back in. You're taking whatever was dug out and it's all mixed together. It can actually separate that and tell you that the soil there is actually different from the surrounding soils that occurred naturally. So it's amazing equipment. I just became certified. Come on, I got some more hats to pass out. A couple more questions. Do you want another hat?
When you figure out you want to get to a particular site, you research it to
research is very important. Someone once asked, where do you find treasure? Treasure is where you find it. Sometimes it defies logic why I found that George Washington button at this old village site. It was right by the threshold of an old house coming up. I don't know why. Sometimes it defies logic, but typically you look for places where the old militia used to take and have marches during the colonial time. You look for old fairgrounds. Use wintertime, downtime I call it, to take and do your research. Find out where things of historical interest happened, what occurred. Maybe a plane crash could have happened years and years ago at this particular site. There could have been an old abandoned military base over here that now is a park or something like that. Not giving you any clues. Places like that. But research is important. I am published in a number of articles. Western and Eastern Treasures, Lost Treasure magazine. I'm in a magazine called Relic Quest. Actually, it's a 500-page book. I've been published in the National Associate Magazine for the FBI. They gave me credit for working crime scenes and assisting the FBI and other police agencies over the years. I did receive a letter of commendation back in 2003 from my agency for working closely with police departments on crime scenes. So to me, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and it still continues on. I still do my training with law enforcement. I'm still available to assist agencies with crime scenes when they ask. And I'm still out there pounding, doing my research, looking for historical artifacts. But I ask you, I know you want to get out of here, but just come down for a couple minutes. I have magazines. Yes? Metal solutions? You mean like if somebody took something from a spent solution from like a jewelry industry? Or something like that? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Like a solution? I think if it had... I would think if they had enough in there, you can ask a question too, weren't you? Because I don't want to carry these hats back. Yeah, it would. If there was enough concentration of that gold or whatever there, the AU solution from a spent process or something like that, yes, it would be able to detect on that. You had a question too, didn't you? I know you did. Oh, all right, it was mutual. Okay. So you discussed on it, collaborated. Come on, I need some more questions. A couple more. Yes?
Do you ever run into problems with like ownership of any artifacts that you would find, or maybe on like state property or private property, so like that? Like what typically would happen to those artifacts?
We have an archae here amongst the midst of us. I knew this was going to come up. Actually, when I discovered the site where I found cannons, pieces of cannon and cannonball at that site in Scituate, I contacted the state Department of Historical, whatever you call it there. There was a gentleman there by the name of Mr. Robinson. I had brought this to his attention thinking that, hey, I found a site here that, there's historical value. I wanted to let him know about the things I found. And to be honest with you, I got a tongue lashing, telling me that I bastardized the site. I had no business being there, even though I had permission from the mill owner who owned the property across the river and on the embankment, basically saying that it had no historical significance from that point on. And I spent years researching that, writing articles and collaborating and gathering all this information. So, I think I was doing a good thing, but not in his mind. So, do I pick up the phone anymore? No. Any more questions? Come on, gotta be. Yes.
You were talking about after rain, it's a good time to.
Want to pass that back to her, please? Go ahead.
Have you or anyone that used metal detectors found anything on the beaches after this big hurricane? Because I've heard that people found artifacts from the 1938 hurricane. And
Oh, even older. My mom, I'm glad you asked that. My mom found one of the oldest coins. I spend thousands of dollars on technology, metal detectors. My mom is a ferret. Her and my dad, who retired from York Police, used to go out after storms and walk the beach. That was their little pastime, holding hands, yeah. I don't think so much that. I think just looking for, hidden treasures. And I'll just say it was in Warwick, which is along a shoreline. She thought it was a bottle cap. Picked it up, looked at it. It had a date on it, 1654. 1654. Turned out to be I think they call a New World oak tree variety shilling that was minted by the mass colonists against King Charles II of England. He did not want the colonists engaging in their own currency. She actually found a piece of silver that was stamped, hand-stamped, worth over $5,000, laying on top of the ground. And I spend thousands of dollars on technology with a metal detector. Maybe once in a while I'll find a silver Kennedy half or something like that. So this stuff is out there. It really is. But listen, you've been a very captive audience. You've been great. I thank you for being here. I know you get credit for that, but I want you to come on up, ask a few questions, but certainly take some books with you. Thank you so much.